Thanks so much, Kira. And hello, Enterprise Techies. Welcome to our September Enterprise Tech Meetup. It is a beautiful, crisp fall day here in New York City, but we're so glad to have attendees from across the globe while we're still running this virtually. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm John Lair. I'm a co-founder and general partner at Workbench, along with my co-founder, Jessica Lin, who's going to be moderating today's panel. We're an enterprise tech-focused venture fund based here in New York City, and we invest in early stage startups throughout the country in $3 to $6 million rounds. And we are obsessed with all things enterprise sales and go-to-market. Today's meetup is oriented around a very popular but very misunderstood topic, product-led growth, or PLG. Our goal with today's panel is to dispel PLG myths with a lineup of trailblazing women that come from leading product roles in companies such as GitLab, Figma, and Airtable. These companies are some of the fastest growing companies right now, and a lot of them have modernized with this PLG motion. So get ready to take a ton of notes during this conversation. Related to our PLG theme, our demo today is from Akash at Octane, which offers turnkey metered billing infrastructure for fast-growing SaaS businesses. Before we begin, a few reminders. All the regulars, you've heard these many times, but it bears repeating. For the tweeters in the room, our hashtag is NYTM for New York Enterprise Tech Meetup. Tweet away, tweet often. There's going to be so many nuggets. It's definitely worth tweeting away today. For anyone who wants to watch today's session or any past events, we post all of them on the Workbench YouTube page. And Kira writes an awesome write-up to recap key takeaways on the Workbench blog after each month's meetup. And we will have time for Q&A after the demo from Octane as well as the panel. So feel free in the interim while the talk is going on to load up the chat with questions, and then we'll make sure to get to as many as possible. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our startup demo from Akash at Octane.
Hey all, it's a pleasure to meet all of you folks. Thanks for having me. You know, PLG is obviously a big hot topic these days, and one of, as we've seen with some of these speakers, one of the big pieces of a proper PLG motion is being able to facilitate usage-based billing. And at Octane, what we do is we enable companies to do usage-based billing quickly and efficiently. One of the challenges that we've seen, especially as companies move to a PLG motion, is being able to, effectively bill your customers, right? From any stage, as you grow along the product axes, you need to be able to charge your customers in a way that actually scales. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to charge on usage. So we're seeing a pretty big global shift towards SaaS businesses now charging their end customers based on consumption. That could be anything. It could be number of seats, API requests, compute. We see great businesses like Datadog, Confluent, all charging on new metrics that are highly scalable, like, okay, charging based on compute, charging based on requests. The challenges that we've seen is that there's a lot of friction between product people and engineers. So a lot of times product people want to create these metered price plans and charge their end customers, but that becomes a pretty significant engineering hurdle. To give you some context, traditionally companies are charging flat fees month to month or flat fees annually. Well, that's one bill amount or 12 bill amounts if it's on a month-to-month basis. When you shift to a usage-based billing model, it becomes highly variable. How you're charging customers becomes extremely complicated. You need to now track usage on a per second basis. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you Octane, which helps make usage-based billing really simple for product and engineering teams. So can everyone see my screen? Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to take that as a yes. You can see my screen. So this is the Octane command center. What we see here is we have a set of customers. We've created a few social media customers like TikTok, Twitter, and we're Cloud Corp. Now at Cloud Corp, we like to charge our customers based on a set of different meters. Pretty standard to be able to charge, for example, based on data transfer, API requests, images, machine storage. I have a few examples here. Now, what's really complicated from a product perspective is saying, okay, I want to charge my different customers based on different meters. So we've made that super simple. So if we drill into a specific customer, for example, you could see for this specific customer, TikTok, what their data transfer looks like on a pretty much hourly basis, day-by-day basis. What we're able to do through Octane is actually in real time track accrued revenue. So as you can see here in this current billing cycle, we can see for TikTok what their accrued revenue looks like. Now, also what we're able to do is generate invoices so that you can actually see for this given customer what their invoiced amounts look like based on different meter dimensions. Now, to go into a bit of the analytics, what we've seen oftentimes is when we're charging based on different meters, it becomes really complicated to really get a larger level breakdown of the usage of all your customers and how much they're spending with you. So we've really made analytics into metered billing super awesome. So you could see on a collection of meters, let's say API requests, data transfer, images, on a month-to-month basis, what is the actual usage of your different meters? We can see breakdowns month to month. We also have revenue. We have revenue breakdowns. When you think about what Octane can facilitate, it facilitates a really easy translation from usage to revenue. So as you can see here, we have Twitter is actually one of the leaders in terms of revenue on a month-to-month basis. We can also see total revenue by meter, because when we think about it, traditionally it was just flat fees. Okay, let's say it was $100 a month. But in a usage-based billing model, you're charging based on multiple meters, and different meters might actually accrue different amounts of revenue for you. So with Octane, we're making it really easy to understand what revenue looks like. So if we go back, just so you understand how this all looks, we've built a no-code experience so product people can actually go ahead and create price plans, try different price plans out. So as you can see here, we have a metered price plan that includes different components like API requests, images, data transfer, storage, machines, etc. If we just view this price plan here, you can see we have the flexibility to take those different meters and charge different amounts, different rates for those different meters. And depending on what your usage is on each of those meters, we can charge different amounts. So as you can see here, we have all of them listed with the base price as well. Just for those developers that are curious how you actually could integrate into this product. Actually, one thing I did want to mention as well is we have integrations. So we integrate with Slack. So if you wanted to be notified when your customers get added to a price plan or when they hit a certain usage threshold, you can be notified all of that through Slack. From a payments perspective, you're probably curious what the end-to-end looks like. Well, I now have a lot of customers that I'm charging on a usage basis. How do I actually charge them? So we integrate directly with multiple payment providers. So we integrate with Stripe, we integrate with Paddle, and we have more integrations coming. We also have a lot of toggle or configurability for our settings on how we invoice, what the grace periods look like, etc. And yeah, so just for the developers that are curious, about how to actually integrate. So we have a full SDK, Python, Node, JavaScript, where you can, Python, Node, and Go, where you can easily just send measurements to us so that you can have the full end-to-end. So we have docs on like creating meters, sending usage, and we have a lot of sophistication in how you can actually do price rollout of different price plans, versioning, etc. So that in a nutshell is the demo. And would love to hear if there's any questions.
All right, we have one that just came in. Does Octane have forecasting functionality?
Yeah, we actually just went into early access on forecasting functionality. Unfortunately, can't demo it at this moment, but what we're actually able to do is forecast usage across the end of the year and and be able to test different price plans and see what your revenue potential is. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out to me at akash@getoctane.io if you'd like a specific demo of the price experimentation tool.
Another one that just came in is, who is the primary user for Octane?
Yeah, so it ends up being, there's two core stakeholders that we often facilitate. One is the engineer, and one is the director, the head of product, the director, whoever owns monetization. So our job is to empower product people to deploy price plans, iterate on price plans, deploy new price plans, and all do that in a no-code user experience, like you saw. And our analytics tabs allows the head of product or the product managers to actually understand their usage across different meter dimensions. Now, for an engineer, we've made it super simple to just send usage. That's all they have to do. If you look at a pretty classic homegrown billing system, it is, unfortunately, the engineer has to do everything. One, send usage, store it in a time series database, do all the transformations based on what the price plans are. And at times they even have to create these homegrown no-code experiences for their product people. So it ends up being a ton of burden on engineers. So ultimately, we're empowering the product people and simplifying that life for the engineer.
Another one that just came in, is it possible for clients to set up hard stops? For example, if I surpass X dollars for the month, pause access.
Yeah, so we have a few, in our API, we're actually supporting, and our UI, we support features and limits. So you can put certain limit thresholds on how much usage. For example, if you want to limit users up to 200 API requests, you can in our UI actually attach that to a price plan. And what your engineer would do would just query our API to understand when they've hit an API limit. So we support that out of the box.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more, and then keep them coming in the chat and we'll try to get to them afterwards. So how is the product inserted? Is it an SDK that goes in the application? Does it reverse engineer stuff from cloud consumption?
Yeah, so it's an SDK. So you send us measurements as events come in on your system, and we process it in our proprietary database and do the aggregations according to the price plans that you define.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for showing us Octane. I know people are continuing to ask questions. If you want to get active in the chat, Akash, and you can respond to some of the other folks,
Okay. Awesome.
Maybe repeat it as well so they can see. And with that, I'd like to turn over to my co-founder, Jess, who is going to be moderating our panel today.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today for our panel on decoding PLG success. As John mentioned, we are all about enterprise sales and go-to-market here at Workbench. But as many of you also know, the winds of enterprise sales are changing. And with the rise of product-led growth, PLG, I know every enterprise startup would like to build a product as self-serve as possible and as low touch as possible on sales. And of course, why wouldn't you? It's truly powerful for customers now to be able to get started on a platform with the click of a sign up button. But the reality of what we've also seen here at Workbench is that really effective PLG that can then convert free users into paid users and then enterprise users is actually a lot harder than it may seem. There's a lot of hard work and iterations and lessons learned that goes into building such a self-serve product. And that is why I am so pumped to host this incredible lineup of product leaders from some of the country's fastest growing venture-backed companies, platforms we know and love, Airtable, Figma, and GitLab. And we'll dive straight in. We'll talk through some nitty-gritty tactical playbook pages that you can all try at home, and then turn it over to you all, our audience, to fire away with questions. And please also drop in questions in chat throughout, and I'll weave them in as best as I can. Sound good? Awesome. So let me introduce our really badass panelists. And of course, we always have a Workbench icebreaker, which is if you were not doing what you're doing today, what would you do instead? So first up, we have Sarah Waldner, who's previously at Splunk and Victor Ops, and now group manager of product management at GitLab. What would you do, Sarah?
Thanks, Jessica. I love this question. And so what I would do today if I didn't need to be working in product is actually what my intended retirement plan will be when I get to that point. And that would be to run an animal rescue.
That's so incredible. I love that. Next up, Kelly O'Shaughnessy, previously at Uber and now product lead at Airtable. Kelly.
Thanks, Jess. Great question. I do love my job in product, so it's tough to give it up. I'd love to have some more time to mentor startups and advise, et cetera. But if it was completely different, I'd probably go into something like interior design.
I love it. Kelly's background is actually not real. It looks very, very real.
Interior design aspirations right here.
Exactly. And last but not least, Katie Szeto, previously Dropbox and now product manager at Figma. Katie.
First of all, nice to meet you, everyone. And I think I would be doing two things, hopefully in parallel. One is I really wish that I could be a professional dancer. So I would probably be a salsa dancer if I could even become that talented. And then I think the second one, which is maybe more attainable, is I love to teach. And so I could see myself potentially as like a high school math teacher or something like that.
Amazing. I love just how multi-talented our speakers always are. So thank you for that. And with that, let's jump into it, right? I think there's so much hype around PLG and a lot of different flavors of it as well. So would love to just break down our discussion perhaps by user journey, right? So getting a user on board, getting them successful and expanding and paying, and then we can talk broader product lessons learned. So first up, hooking the user, if you will. So it's clear that with PLG, even for B2B software companies, it means now building a consumer-like product, right? It's a product that's easier to use, that delights users. So how do you balance functionality versus ease of use? And I think, Kelly, I'll kick it over to you to start at Airtable.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think this is a great question because I think about it truly almost every single day. And I think for Airtable, being that consumer-like product is really about talking to our end consumers as well as our buyers, taking the needs of those multiple personas into account. So kind of what I mean by that is, they said Airtable, we have creators. So we have the builders who delight in bridging teams and building applications and making their processes better. We have our collaborators who use Airtable to input data and reference it as a source of truth. We have execs who rely on Airtable's reporting capabilities. We have admins who, are part of the organizations who administer and govern Airtable's use. And we really need to talk to all of these customer types constantly to solve for all of their needs, not just solving for the buyer's perception of what those end user needs are. I will say that SaaS customers, I think, tend to be a lot more engaged than traditional end consumers. We have a lot more touch points for feedback. Users are usually more invested in the product. So we can end up having, I think, more success with those more complex features because we do have that really good back and forth. But I will say that Airtable, we really want it to be designed to be easy for anyone to get started with, rather than requiring a lengthy configuration process or trainings to start using. We sweat the details of our product, front ways, back ways, design, copy, UX. Nothing is too small. We always ask before we ship a product, does this feel Airtable-y? Which actually just means, is it intuitive and magical, and are we really supporting those champions who are making Airtable go viral within their own companies, like, doing things like super simple sharing or, providing views that are super easy to understand at scale. So that's a little bit about how I think about it, at least from the Airtable perspective.
I really like that adjective. Is this Airtable-y? And we'll talk more about prioritization because I think that's such a huge challenge for most product leaders, right? There's so many personas and sometimes they are competing. And so we'll dive a little bit more into that. But I'd love to turn it over to Sarah at GitLab. You talked a little bit about how you all think about product development and really focus on streamlining user journeys. Can you just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to build on a couple of things that Kelly said. I think it all starts with the user journey. And then your original question was, how do you balance new functionality off of optimizing for who is already there? And one of the core values at GitLab that I think has made us the product that we are today is iteration. And so fundamentally, that's the flipping back and forth between something new and make it better, something new and make it better. So if you're starting with something brand new, you're going to, of course, have a user journey into how someone might use that or how it fits into a bigger vision that you have. But the first iteration is always going to be the addition of functionality. And then you're going to see how people interact with it, and you're going to make it better in tiny increments. And so I always like to add a new feature and then streamline it. So you're not adding anything new, you're just making it easier to use, more intuitive to understand. On that, starting from a larger user journey, especially with a product as vast as GitLab, it's really important to understand collaboration and communication between product teams, because I think that's something else that degrades UX really, really fast. So focusing on how you increase collaboration between those entities is also a really important part of that.
Yeah, and I love this one point you had mentioned in our notes, which is just that you want to be able to observe, whether or not people can easily move on to the next part, right, in a user journey, and simply enabling it's not sufficient. Can you just talk about how you're best observing this, especially for some product leaders who are maybe new to this? Is this a qualitative observation? Is it quantitative?
Yeah, I love that question. We instrument metrics and then understand how a certain person, an individual, moves through the platform. And then we compare it to what our assumption was. And so the places that they diverge is either somewhere we went wrong, or maybe they're using it in a way that we didn't necessarily think that they were going to. So to summarize that, that's start with a hypothesis and track out what you think the user journey is going to be, then actually instrument it and compare it to what you thought it was. And it doesn't mean that you need to try and move them back to the journey. It just means that you need to understand why they went in a different direction. And then the answer to that can be poor UX, or they're using it to solve a different use case that you didn't think that wasn't necessarily your target. And then you need to make the decision of, is that the new target? Is that where we want to pivot to? Or no, we're going to continue to pursue our original vision for these reasons. And so when you see that divergent point within your data, someone is doing something different, that is when you want to start having conversations with those individuals to figure out what's going on, because data is only the starting point. And it's the anecdotal feedback that's going to get you the rest of it that'll help you move forward.
Awesome. And I think it's funny because we already saw a question come in, which is all about, hey, can the panel discuss how data and analytics play a role in decision-making? So, it's clear that, product leaders are, of course, trying to be as data-driven as possible. So maybe really quickly, just around the horn, like how are you all using product analytic tools such as Amplitude, or is it built internally? Just so folks get a sense of the stack. Yeah, Sarah, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sorry, I just spoke, so I'm going to give other people a chance to chat. We are using a lot of homegrown instrumentation tools. And I actually don't know if I'm supposed to say what other data tools we're using.
Okay,
so,
that's helpful. Yeah. Cool. Katie at Figma.
Sure. Yes. Data definitely plays a huge role at Figma in general, although I would say that both analytics and qualitative research are on pretty equal footing. Both are extremely important and we leverage both. But given that the question is about data analytics, we actually have a dedicated data science function within Figma, which has just been a tremendous asset. So we have actually at least one data scientist embedded in every single product area. And yes, we certainly use tools for this. I don't know if I should share them, but I think it's probably fine to say that we use Segment and Mode and Snowflake, among others, but we also have a host of homegrown tools as well. Yep. So we built an experimentation framework internally that's been pretty core to basically how we launch every experiment.
Awesome. And then Kelly, do you want to just answer really quickly and then we can jump back in?
Definitely a big plus one to almost everything Katie just said. We use a lot of homegrown tools as well and use Mode, and have our sort of data science team also leading the charge on that, with PMs being very integrated into that data-driven process.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the user journey, which is, you've got users on the platform, you're tracking them using a lot of analytical tools to observe their behaviors. The question now is, how do you convert them, right? How do you build these really effective activation and conversion points so that people do pay? And so maybe Katie, can we have you talk a little bit more at Figma, how you think about this?
Yeah, I'd love to. So within Figma, the way we talk about activation and conversion is that, and I apologize in advance for saying this jargon word, but for us, it's all about the magic moment. So that's basically like understanding where it is that your users really light up, understanding like the actual perceived value of your product by end users, and specifically what is the moment that they first understand that value. And so just to make that a little bit more concrete, what we found with Figma within our free tier is that the magic moment occurs actually when you have multiple cursors in the same file all doing stuff together. And maybe that doesn't sound that magical to you, but that's sort of like what we saw in the data. And then when we did a bunch of qual research, that's just what we were hearing from these users of, oh my God, I can really see how this would change how my team works together. And so how is this related to activation and conversion? So with activation, once you understand that magic moment, activation is really all about how can you get users to experience that magic moment as fast as possible. So from the second that they land on figma.com, like what are all the blockers that get in the way of getting them to that magic moment? And tying that back to the data piece, I think that's a really excellent place where data can play a role, because you can literally look for like where the drop-offs are occurring. And of course, you can also lean on qualitative research to see what's going on in the user's head. And so, going back to the Figma example, we found that the magic moment is when you have multiple people collaborating in the same file. And so one of the investments that was really important for us was to focus on sharing. So when you have a new user who enters your product, how do you get them to pretty quickly share a file with somebody else so that they can start to experience the magic of, we call it multiplayer internally. But it's quite a hard problem psychologically, because we also found that a lot of designers like really don't want to share their work until it's perfect and beautiful and finalized. So there's a big psychological element to like, how do you make it less scary to share? And then sorry for dragging on, but I love
This
this
is
stuff.
awesome.
So when it comes to conversion, I think, again, it ties back to the magic moment, because again, within Figma, we believe that the magic moment that your paid users talk about has to be the magic moment that your free users talk about, because it's kind of unfair to ask users on the free tier, oh, imagine the value. Like, imagine you had this feature, imagine how valuable it would be, therefore you want to pay more. Users in the free tier have to already understand the value, be able to articulate it. And I think pushing them towards an upsell before they get that value is ineffective and can be perceived as pushy. And so again, to make this concrete, I think it's safe for me to talk about this. We Figma ran an experiment, I want to say starting last year, where we sort of took a look at how our free tier was structured. And in the past, the way it was structured is users would be allowed 2 editors and unlimited files. And we thought about that and we were like, wait, we're hearing from our paid users that the magic moment and the reason that they upselled was when they realized you could have all of these multiple cursors in the same file. And then we were like, oh, wait, but we're not letting the users in our free tier even experience that moment. And so in the experiment, we actually like inverted those variables and we said, okay, let's let free users have unlimited editors, thereby, we can let them experience the magic for free and gate them instead on the number of files. And so it's an experiment we ran and it was wildly successful. And I think was one of the most impactful experiments in Figma's history. So that is my spiel on magic moments.
And I'm so glad. Thank you so much for just sharing even the experience and like the hypothesis building behind the scenes. Because I think a lot of people only see the end product. They see, oh, you have 3 files per team, but understanding how you and your team came to that and actually had to rejigger it, right, is part of the journey and part of the fun. But that's so helpful to hear. Sarah, at GitLab, you also talk a little bit about how you've thought about pricing tiers and testing that. Can you share a little bit about how you think about it?
Yes. So at GitLab, we strive to have a full experience of our product in every tier. little bit of background on this because it frames a lot about how we build product. We are a single application for the DevOps lifecycle. We have 10 different stages, and our vision is to replace the distributed tool chains that people have for their engineering organizations to build software. So instead of having 15 tools integrated together, you have GitLab. So at GitLab, we have 3 pricing tiers: our free tier, premium, and ultimate. And in addition to being a company for profit, we're also very involved in the open source community and have a huge user base in our free tier. So we use the free tier a lot as a way to test hypotheses or gauge interest. And so often there's 2 ways we do this. You can put something in free and see how it does. You can also put something in a paid tier, and if you see it not doing well, we can gift it to our community or drop it down to free to see if it was simply a misalignment with someone who's paying versus someone who's in free. We also are very integrated with our community in that you can interact directly on product issues with product managers to get feedback with all of our users on our platform. So that's a little bit of how we use the different pricing tiers to test. Depending on the stage in which you work at GitLab, your pricing strategies are going to look different if you're more mature versus if you're newer. So the more mature ones have very robust ultimate or premium offerings. But if you're a newer stage at GitLab and you're testing what you're bringing to market, it's just amazing to have millions of free users to get to talk to bring them interesting things. It makes UX research for us very easy.
That must be so much fun. And that's actually something we hear a lot about sometimes from enterprise companies, right? It's hard to sometimes get in front of users directly. And so, and also a huge volume. So I can imagine the power of your community is such a blast to work with on the product side.
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
awesome. So as we transition down this journey, again, you've got users on board, you're upselling them, right? And each of your platforms do have this enterprise tier, right? So that is, you got to get them to that big conversion. Can we just, switch gears and talk about the enterprise side of the house and specifically how you all work with the sales team, right? So how does product work with sales to help, get signals to upsell to existing customers? And so Kelly, if you want to share a little bit about what you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely are super collaborative at Airtable, and, product and sales and marketing are all constantly talking, but to sort of touch on some of those metrics and those signals that we use to push on those upsell moments for a bottoms up company like Airtable, a lot of our sales opportunities are really coming from these individual champions within large companies where they sort of, are finding a way to improve their own processes. They do a little Googling, they find Airtable, they get super excited about it, and they really champion it to their team, and it starts to grow internally. So with that sort of state, in mind, we pay a lot of attention to, usage within specific corporate domains. So active users within a domain. We also map out usage across different business units. So maybe there are a couple of different teams within an enterprise who are using it even at small scale. And that'll be another positive signal for us. And then, I think sort of intuitively, when we see a large number of active users on our self-serve plans, so our free or our plus, which are our bottom 2 tiers, those represent also, high signals for the team as well. So that's sort of, I think, from the metric side of the house. We also keep an eye on like in-product growth signals. So this is maybe, like fast growing workspaces or starter plans, reaching our free limits, or even like we keep an eye on if execs have joined our workspace. That's also like a fun signal for us. So we try to kind of look at it from a few different angles to make sure that we have a holistic picture of, hey, I think this is actually a moment where teams are starting to get engaged. Let's step in there.
Awesome. That's really helpful to hear, especially execs joining, right? Like if an exec is joining, it's like clearly something's going right.
It's real.
Well, Sarah at GitLab, you shared a little bit about, how you empower your sales team again with this data and help them again understand who to reach out to and upsell to. You also wrote active check-ins with repetitive reminders, which made me laugh out loud. So can you maybe share a little bit like what these reminders are about and how repetitive they are?
Yeah, that's just one of my not very strategic, but very effective and tactical pieces of advice for product
That's what
managers.
we're here for. Yes.
Right? Yeah. Especially if you're someone who's working on a part of the product that's kind of your horizon 3, you're a future bet. Maybe your customers aren't necessarily asking for it. And so oftentimes those types of products are never going to cross the radar of a sales individual who's really focused on the core things that close deals. And so I can give an example on this. I founded the incident management product at GitLab. And when we were first starting out, it was not something that our user base was asking for. People looked at GitLab as this is a software development tool, not necessarily an operations tool. So we weren't talking to the people who maintained or sat on call for the software products that the engineering teams are using GitLab to build. And so the way to get sales to talk about this new product or encourage people to try it out was to really understand what engineers in GitLab, what existing features they were using, or what size of organization they belonged to, or what behavioral patterns I could see with existing data that would lead me to believe they'd be interested in this. And so I came up with a bulleted list of, does your customer fit these buckets? Are they of this size? Do you know how big their engineering teams are? Or have they ever asked you these questions? If so, here's a pile of enablement content for the sales team. And in terms of repetition, I was in their Slack channels. I was all over my own LinkedIn, and I was joining their weekly meetings. So I was joining the technical account managers meetings. I was joining the solution architect meetings. Repetition is really important in terms of something that somebody else may not be aware of. And so the grunt work of me doing that led to growth within that area.
I love that. And actually, I have a list here from all three of you of super tactical kind of meeting cadences. And so it sounds like you said, Sarah, PMs are directly involved in pre-sales calls. You guys are the ones like developing, maintaining pitch decks, which is so interesting to hear. You guys have a Slack channel where sales is encouraged to reach out to the right PMs to get on calls, right? And then also these product directories, which is so cool to hear. Katie, you literally listed out your calendar in terms of all your events. You want to just fly through them really quickly, just so folks can really understand just like how cross-functional, how collaborative it is between sales and product.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you originally started off by talking about the enterprise, and you just won't succeed in the enterprise unless you really understand those different personas, like what they think about, what they care about, what they're struggling with. And I feel like sales is the gateway to just all of that knowledge. So it's extremely important. So, okay, we have a monthly meeting, just to get really tactical. We have a monthly meeting between my product team and the group of sales managers. So the sales force at Figma has scaled enough such that it's impossible. It's a little bit unwieldy for our team to meet directly with the entire sales force, but we found that meeting with the sales managers is a pretty happy medium, and the managers have a great pulse on what is on the minds of their teams and what is okay to share with those teams. And so that meeting often generates like special touch points with the broader sales force. As you mentioned, we do have Slack channels for literally every single product area that sales members and marketers and pretty much everyone in the company is instructed to sort of know about and write to when they have questions or if they have customer feedback. And then we also, we have a handful of like really important strategic accounts. And so we actually have private Slack channels for each of those accounts that include the AM for that account, the product manager, the product marketer, basically all of the key people, so that we can have really fast response times if any issues come up. So that's sort of like the general framework. And then in terms of me personally, there's just I recommend like really taking the time to get to know your sales team, because you'll probably find like a few people who are really just gems. So one of those people for me is our solutions architect. He literally spends every single day, all day, talking to customers. And he's a really great person to speak to, because, you know, he has a lot of time with sort of the champion at the customer, but he also spends a lot of time with like IT and central engineering teams. And so he just has like a breadth of knowledge and can sort of represent the voice of all of the different customer profiles and buyers we have. So just like if your company has a solutions architect, that's a magical role, and you should really leverage them. And then I've also just gotten to know a couple of our reps throughout the company who just have like incredible insight and advice. And so I try to keep some form of cadence with them. And then another trick I found handy is that anytime I'm doing a product review, I actually invite the head of sales. And that's been great, I think, both to keep sales leadership like very in the loop on the roadmap and all of the strategic decisions we're making, but also to just like present that aligned front, and nobody can make the commercial case for a product feature better than our head of sales. So it's just like it's a win-win, and I recommend doing that if you don't.
I love that. And so everyone go out and give a shout out to your solutions architect today. Awesome. And then I guess the last thing, both Kelly and Sarah, you mentioned this, but you know, meetings where you all find out why you lose deals are also really important. So I don't know, Kelly or Sarah, do you want to jump in and talk about how those meetings go down?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I think we have a couple of forums for this, and it's super important to really understand the gaps. The positive feedback is always really great, but the gaps is where you can have the most impact. So we have a like bi-weekly sales share out on why we're losing deals and where those other customers ended up going and what their use case was and why Airtable wouldn't work for that, and really specifically spotlighting some of those areas. And then you get, you know, tagging in product managers and saying, hey, we really should solve for this, as a really good input just to the day-to-day work that we're doing, if we're already working on a project in that area, or if it is more of a foundational bet that we need to think about for the next upcoming quarter. I also like totally love hopping on sales calls, and I think this is normal for us as well, like Katie was mentioning, just to field questions and talk about our roadmaps and receive feedback. And even in some of those meetings, you'll receive like, oh, well, do you have XYZ? You know, do you have, you know, this security in place, you know, these permissions in place? And sometimes they say, you know, we're working on it, but not quite yet. And it's good to just have that connector point so that customers or future customers know that we are trying and we're building, and they have a direct line to product. And then on our side of the house, we know what we need to do to get those deals done.
Awesome. And I'll ask one last question, then I'm going to turn over to chat. But the last question is, of course, assuming everything goes well in this user journey, but there are users who inevitably churn off, right? And that's especially, I think, clear with some of these PLG platforms. So when is churn bad, and when should you be really concerned? And what's pretty clear from some of your responses to me is that it's actually a combination of metrics, right? It's not necessarily just one number you live and die by. So maybe, Sarah, do you want to take that one really quickly?
Yeah. So typically we don't love churn, but there's always going to be some assumed amount of churn per month. And sometimes we just weren't a good fit for that customer, and that's okay. And I'll say that
Right.
GitLab's been really good at identifying they are using us for something that we are not meant to be used for. And that can come from a number of signals, feature requests they've submitted, conversations we've had with them, just general poor health of that particular customer. And in terms of tracking churn, Jessica, was that the original question? You want me to just talk about generally how we think about it?
Yeah, I think the metrics behind churn, right? Because again, it's not, you've kind of shared it's a combination of maybe a few metrics.
Yeah. So we're very instrumented at GitLab, and we look at trends over time. And so I think basically, as you start to see a downward trend of a particular feature, your next question is this something that is core to our product? And is this trend surprising? Or is this something new where this is signaling, okay, we can turn this around? So I think a high level question would be, how old is the feature? Is this surprising? And then at our disposal, are we prepared to fix this? And is this worth our time?
Awesome. That's really helpful. Okay, so we've heard throughout the discussion, folks have mentioned security a few times, and that's actually one of the questions from my good friend Sandeep in chat, which is, how do you build with security and policy settings in mind for users and IT admins? I mean, this is clearly an enterprise group, right? And so that's a reality for anyone building an enterprise. You have to keep security in mind, and that's sometimes I feel like the unsexy part that people, we have to take care of that. Any high-level comments and thoughts on as a product leader?
I mean, actually, our ability to do that has led to enormous growth at GitLab. So I would say we are really focused on that. And in terms of product development, we use the Hive model, where I think Katie and Kelly have talked about partnerships before, but it's your product manager, it's your engineering manager, but you also have a security counterpart in addition to a product marketing counterpart, and then a QA quality team counterpart. And it's a balance for every milestone that we plan, which is